Good morning. Give it another minute or two and then we'll get going.
Got enough time to drink some more coffee. It's great.
Absolutely. Never can have enough coffee. It's 11:01. We'll go at 11:02 and we'll get going. Okay, we're gonna get going. Thank you everyone for joining. Eddie, thank you for taking the time and joining with us today. We really appreciate you coming on board and spending the time with us today.
Absolutely.
So we're going to talk about basically, as our theme has been, the codependent relationship with your office, and specifically we brought Eddie on. Eddie is one of our partners that we work with at Ingram Micro with the Modern Workplace and Office 365. So Eddie and I are going to have a conversation regarding your security, Microsoft's security stance, and what security offerings are in place that we can help protect you. So Eddie, I'm going to let you kind of take it off and get going.
Sure. So welcome, guys. I appreciate everybody jumping on and the invite from Michael and team. This first slide, one of the pieces that we've, everybody kind of got accustomed to in their normal days, right? Pre-COVID, as everybody might be able to remember what normal used to be, is that when you had your old infrastructure around your facility, you were often taking and, if you had, firewall, email filtering, some antivirus, and you back stuff up, you were pretty good. You were pretty much set and really didn't need a whole lot else. Now, as times were changing, even pre-COVID, some times were changing. We were moving things to cloud. People like myself that normally spend, when we were traveling, and hopefully getting back to that soon, we were taking, and I was spending 2 to 3 weeks a month on the road. A couple of days here, a week there, stuff like that. But what that enabled us to do was that, what empowered us was we were working off our cell phones, we were working off our tablets, off our laptops, things like that. We were all over the place, whether it was on on an airplane, at a restaurant, at an airport, whatever, coffee shop. We now had more access to be able to take and go through and really work from anywhere. And so when I wasn't on the road, I was working from here. This is my office here in South Carolina in my house, and that's where I was working from. Now, that's great when you are the worker, right? When you're doing that. Where it kind of starts to cross a line and become more of a headache is for your IT folks, and making sure that you can take and that you can fend off those vulnerabilities as you're in all these other places. Because COVID has come along, cyber attacks on the SMB world have almost doubled. It's been a struggle for a lot of folks that don't have the expertise to take and make sure that they're managing all these things correctly. And that's where guys like, Michael and his group and Microsoft can help. And so as you're looking through, the work from home places go under the same type of scenario. They being the company, Can't take and, make sure that every home network is secure, but there are steps that you can take to make sure that what you're doing with that access is secure. And we'll talk more about those and get into some more of those details in the next slides.
Okay, so Eddie, what you're really saying here is a lot more to protect than what was in place, even a year and a half ago. Basically, as we've
Yes.
moved into this world of COVID and where the world probably has changed forever in the way we think of work, there's a lot more points to protect this. And as we've gone to the cloud and we're moving to the cloud, we have to think about our security in a more dynamic way than we currently do.
Absolutely. Um, Even to be able to take and, and we'll talk more about some of these in the upcoming slides. But if you think about it, I mean, how many of us has actually lost our cell phone? Well, think about that today. How much business do you do on your cell phone? How secure is that information? Being able to take and use, mobile data, mobile device management, or maybe even mobile application management. So if something does come up, you can still react even though you don't have the device. There's a lot of cool things that can happen there that those are very reactive, but we also have some proactive things that we'll talk about more in the future too, just to make sure that you can do your work and do it safely without fear of, the inevitable, happening that you hear stories about day after day, and with certain attacks and things like that that are happening and becoming more prevalent.
Wonderful. Let me move on.
So I believe we've all seen these, right? The Gartner Magic Quadrant. From a Microsoft perspective, it's one of those things that Microsoft doesn't do a whole lot of self-promotion necessarily in this piece. They're not going to talk about their competition because back in the day, and I'm talking the day is 4 years ago, when Microsoft released Defender, it wasn't really good. It just wasn't. I'll just say it. It wasn't the best product that Microsoft had ever put out there. And with their vision of where they wanted to go and what they wanted to do, Microsoft started investing over $1 billion a year and now has 3,500 employees worldwide that concentrate on nothing but security. And so when you take the muscle of Microsoft and the resources, the money that they have to be able to take and throw at that, they can accomplish some really great things in a very short period of time. And so this is a look at basically where they are now in the upper right-hand quadrant, above a bunch of the other guys that you may look on there and see that are, known for being really good at security. And that's been a big thing for them to take and get these type of accolades from third-party folks that go strictly on the merits of the product itself. And they kind of let those folks kind of speak to them on how they take and what they've been able to accomplish and how well their product works, most importantly, and how you guys can take the benefit of making sure that you're incorporating some of these things that they have to offer out there. And that's why this slide is basically up there, is just to show, hey, this is actually where they are.
So in other words, Microsoft has changed a lot over the last number of years. It was always looked at as they were the security issue, and now they're this protector of your data as well at this point. Their whole stance of everything is in place. And we've seen that with everything from our Azure, where we've got basically able to lock down where people can log in, where people can, what data they're using, what devices they're using. Basically, we can lock down, basically, we've done this with multiple clients where we've locked down, they cannot put a device without approval. So basically, we've got device approval even. They can't attach a phone to corporate data without any sort of device approval, is a great one, for instance.
Oh yeah, no, conditional access is great. Not that it happened to me, but I did have a friend in the industry that back when COVID first started off, and I'll use the example of me here in South Carolina. I log in the morning, I drink my coffee, I get stuff going, and somebody from Arizona, we'll say Phoenix, tries to take and log in with my credentials just somehow, some way. In that piece of it, 2 hours later, it's geographically impossible for me to get from South Carolina to Phoenix, Arizona, and try to log in there. And you can set that up to where it says, hey, not only things that are geographically impossible, that you lock those down and you don't give them access. It gives me a notification, hey, somebody's trying to sign on with your information. Let your IT team know. Lets the Microsoft security team know, hey, we're seeing some very unusual type of activity here. And we'll get into the view and the optic in which Microsoft has to be able to take and point some of that stuff out in the future slides here. But that is absolutely correct. There are 5 different ways to take and make every little piece and facet on how we take and connect and protect information so that only folks inside your organization that need access to certain information have access to it.
So I look at it from the point of view of, I came from an accounting background, and I look at our information today as the new inventory. We typically look at a box and in a warehouse, and we want to make sure the employees don't leave with the box, because employee pilferage is one of the top pieces. I look at the fact that how can we make sure your data is not getting removed out by your employees from a point of view that you don't want them to, or somebody's coming in and exfiltrating your data. We've seen, pieces and points with that. I mean, all over the place where that is the biggest piece going on. So I think securing your data and making sure wherever it sits on whatever cloud is really important today.
Oh, absolutely. Think about it. If you have, your head of your HR department has all the very, personal information, the personal identifiable information of every employee at their at their fingertips at some point in time during the day. Do they need it at midnight on a Saturday? No. You can even limit that to say, hey, this person can only access this if they VPN'd in, working from home, if they VPN'd in, and it's from the hours of 8 to 7, whatever late hours most of us are working till these days. So you can take and limit the hours. You can limit it by device. You can, during normal times, pre-COVID, you could even limit it down to location. So somebody would have to be physically on the network at the corporate, brick and mortar before they could have access to some of that information. So that's
What you're saying. So one of the things I think you're coming up with is we with Microsoft, a lot of these conditional accesses are available. But if you're looking at any cloud provider, it's one of the questions you really need to be asking, right? What
Absolutely.
devices you can access it from, where you can access it from, and how, and so what controls do they have in place? Because I think we've come across this with clients where we say to them, great, you signed up with this new provider. How do you prevent them from going to log in on their home computer to this? How do you prevent them from just downloading the app on their iPhone and accessing it, or wherever? So I think these are important points that when we had the traditional network where we had a server and a firewall, access was much harder to get to it. Now that we've made it easier, we just have to think in a more 3D way, is what I say, about access to the data.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think it's one of the things is really being able to take and change how we think around what is, what we have the capability to do, and what Microsoft has brought to the offering. Since COVID has kicked in and we were all working from home, Microsoft has been throwing a lot at making sure that not only are they giving us access to some of the information in the way that we need it to do our jobs from home, but they're also taking and tweaking it to make it even more safe. So there are some new things that are coming out that they're going to announce, which are really cool. And we won't get into those today, but those are things that you guys could reach out to Michael and team and learn more about. But even when it was announced a week or so ago, was about passwordless security. And we won't dive deep into that one, but just something to cook in the back of your brain a little bit as you're thinking as we go through this. Nobody can steal your password if you don't have one.
Mm-hmm.
And you're using other forms of authentication, which Microsoft does have in play today. I know it's not a new concept, but Microsoft is now building it in to the products that you may already use day to day.
I know that was available even on the personal side of the consumer side, and I've been using that on the consumer side for about a year now, where basically I didn't have to enter a password. My Microsoft Authenticator would allow me access by authenticating a code or something else just right from the device. And on
Yep.
top of that, we had a policy in place that basically the authenticator had to have a code and a PIN on it or FaceTime ID in order to get access to the device. So you've got
Yep.
multiple facets in there. Okay.
Yep.
So here we,
Yeah, here is this is just some more accolades from other, again, third-party folks that honestly, I will say, they weren't paid to do these. They don't care if your product is good or bad. They just come out to tell the truth about it, to inform the masses on, is it what they say it is from a vendor perspective? And so I know basically I was looking, or I'm looking to take and upgrade my my Wi-Fi mesh network here at my house. I've got a good one currently, but it's a couple years old. It's dated. I just had gigabit fiber put into the house, and I want to be able to utilize that more so and make sure I get the full throughput that I can get through every device, or out to every one of my devices. And so I personally go to SE Labs. I've used them for years to go out and see what they say about it. Because if you just do a Google search on something, right, whatever paid advertisement is going to come up and tell you the same thing. So here is where you can see some of the other ones, with A/B test. Some of these guys have come out and basically given Microsoft, 5 stars. They've come out and said, hey, these guys really do what they do well. It's not false. And so this is just another one of those slides that's more accolades to the folks saying, hey, yes, Microsoft's security pieces and parts that they have are legitimate.
so, and we sell, we can talk a little bit about, we sell a lot of the Microsoft Business Office 365 Premium. And as part of that, that includes a lot of these security pieces, everything from Azure AD to the Defender and basically everything else. And as I understand it, there's some new pieces that were released about multiple device, a dashboard for endpoint manager and zero trust that's going to come into place shortly. So
yeah, it's been that piece, M365 Business Premium has been, basically what they call the hero SKU. If you guys are looking for a certain product that will be able to take and provide you with the same type of security that, Fortune 500 companies use. When Michael talks about the security that's built in, it uses, Intune, it uses conditional access, it uses data loss prevention. Just all the different features that are there. Those are they aren't watered down versions of what enterprise uses. They are the same exact versions of what enterprise uses. So it doesn't matter if you've got 2 employees or 250 with Business Premium. You can take and get that same type of security features that some of the larger folks use. Now they may be using like an E5 license, something that's a little bigger and a little more robust. But the reason why those are a little bit more is because of the sheer numbers of what those larger companies are having to take and accommodate. So it's not, you don't get less protection with Business Premium. It's just that they get a couple of more features as you move up the stack to be able to take and do things that normally impact large enterprise customers that normally most SMBs don't have to deal with.
yes, yeah, there's a lot more entry points into their data. So there's a lot more analytics available, for instance.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay, don't be scared of this slide. It is actually one of my favorites. This is the piece of it when I've talked with customers in the past, by customers, I mean my partners like ITS, to be able to go through and go, why is Microsoft better than some of the other products that are out there? And this is the one slide that I pull up. And it's the one that basically opened my eyes, even on the security side, back when I saw some of these things, a year and a half ago, was think of the optic, the lens that Microsoft gets to look through to be able to watch, understand, and see what is happening out in the world as far as security goes. Some of these numbers have gone up because of COVID and whatnot. But, when you have 6.5 trillion, signal threats a day that are analyzed through Microsoft. Well, and you go, okay, that's good, but literally take and think of this. If you were looking through a microscope or through a telescope to get a good view of everything that's happening, they get a view into everything that goes through O365, M365, or what's that? The number down at the bottom is 630 billion monthly authentications through Azure, basically every month. And that has gone up. I think it's now up to 400 and some odd billion a week or something crazy like that. Their Bing search engine, 18 billion plus Bing pages that are scanned. The one that kind of made me go, wow, I never thought about it this way. What about Xbox? How many people get on Xbox? How many, kids and adults now that, play on Xbox every day? They get the view into that. So they get to see informed patterns. They use, AI and machine learning to be able to take and watch stuff and go, oh, wait a minute. We've just watched, 10 authentications come through in the last 2 seconds. That one there didn't log in normally. That's an anomaly. Why? They grab it, they inspect it, they see what's happening. They're looking for those oddities. And so even down to the point of me logging in, if my piece shows that, hey, nope, he's a normal user, he may log in from these couple of different devices, and this is how he normally goes through to authenticate. Well, wait a minute. This action that was just taken isn't normal. Why is that? And so they get to be able to take and look at through that optic to be able to see all this different data going back and forth. And why is that significant? Is because none of the other security providers have that view. None of them can take and look and watch and see what patterns they can pick out. And using machine learning and AI helps them take that to an even another level. So keep that in the back of your mind as well as you're taking and you're thinking about, what products to move forward with. Microsoft and their security pieces there, they have a view that nobody else has.
So, for instance, we have a lot of clients now that are living in the Windows virtual desktop world, living in Office 365, have their computers Azure joined. So what you're saying to me is basically Microsoft's correlating all that data for that individual, for that company, and basically saying, okay, it makes sense, right? Somebody's logging into Azure from this IP. They've got their email coming from this IP. Okay, they're in Microsoft's cloud accessing data. It all makes sense. Now all of a sudden something comes out from the Ukraine accessing that same IP, for instance. They're looking and saying, okay, hey, that flag doesn't make sense. That data should be turned off or at least flagged and notified. Is that a legitimate piece of data?
Yep. No, absolutely. And that goes back to conditional access as well. You can even take and break it down by geography with conditional access. So if you are a company and you only deal with the continental United States, you can lock that down to where if you're not in the continental United States, you don't get access.
And we have that. We have a customer where we do conditional access. And then we have a situation where we have an executive who travels to Israel and he calls us up first time out and he says, I can't get access to my email. And we're like, okay, we have to make an exception for conditional access to Israel for his email. Once we turned on Israel as a country for him, he was able to get access to it, but it showed that the technology actually worked. And I think one of the points that you kind of come to, and I was listening to another thing about when you talk about security, antivirus, firewalls, and a lot of the other stuff are reactive pieces. I think what we're trying to do is actually get on the proactive side, not allow access to the data or really limit access to the scope and points that we want people to have access from. So if somebody's outside that parameter, they can't see it, they can't access it.
Yeah. And the one thing, and then, Michael and I have had these talks before too, is the biggest threat to any company are their employees. It is a piece to where most of it is, there's no malice when they do it. It's 100% unintentional. You have somebody that sends a phishing email that is highly social engineered to where they think it comes from a friend or a colleague or a coworker, and they click on something. There are training steps to go through to help folks be able to recognize that, but their credentials being lost. I had a customer, or a partner that had a customer that had gone through and lost their laptop. They just forgot it at an airport. And I was like, okay, well, get in and lock it down. And they're like, yeah, but you don't understand. The other side of this is that the person that was traveling wrote all their passwords down on the sticky note and had it stuck in between the clamshell of the laptop. So they not only could they shut down the access to the laptop, which is fantastic, but the person had their username and password for everything written down. And that goes to where, guess what? If you remove that password piece, that's no longer an option to be an additional threat, because they could take that information and go somewhere else. And again, conditional access comes in as a point of view, data loss prevention, all those things start to creep up, and that just builds to the robustness of the different ways that Microsoft knows how to protect their own systems the best,
And I think,
and how they can do that.
and we've talked about this, we talked about a lot of with clients. We went to BitLocker for all laptops, and now we're going for all desktops with it. BitLocker, in case anybody doesn't know, is Microsoft's native encryption included in Windows 10 Professional across the board. So we say to people, if you lose a laptop and you haven't put the password on the sheet and you lose the laptop, as Eddie's saying, you lock the laptop down, or even if you can't ever recover the laptop, the hard drive in that laptop is a brick, literally no access to it. With BitLocker, nobody can get access to the data. If you are a company where you're compliant with SOX or HIPAA or whatever else, and you don't have that, now you have a reporting incident, versus you just have, if you have BitLocker and you have followed your policies, you just have a reporting incident on your report that says, John Smith's laptop was lost, BitLocker enforced, disabled access to the laptop, all data's reset passwords, and we can move on.
Yeah, no, it's they're doing things in a lot of ways that we haven't had to look at in the past necessarily. And they now bring it to the forefront so that we are thinking about those things, and they're able to take and offer up those pieces. So I think it's really cool. It's a great time to be in security and just see all the different pieces that are happening. So it's really cool to see.
Wonderful.
And so with this one here, these are some of the things that I think we're all thinking about. When I have partners and they have their end users on the phone and we're having conversations, these are probably the top 3 questions that they want to have answered for them. How can you do, remote work better? How do you make sure that you're staying safe and secure, that you're protecting your data? And at the end of the day, how can we take and potentially reduce costs for this? And there's a couple of different facets on how you want to take and think about these pieces. Not just we'll talk about the cost, because that's one last one I just said. It's not necessarily that the products are going to cost you less. It's that think of it almost like a way of like an insurance policy to a certain extent, is that most of the time when someone is phished or ransomwared in the US, the average cost, I believe, is currently about $160K. And so most small businesses don't have $160K sitting in the bank. Most of them don't have $60K sitting in the bank, as far as expendable, money that's just sitting out there that they can liquefy to make this, pay somebody off. Normally, if they have any type of amount of money like that, they're reinvesting in their company, right? They're trying to grow, they're trying to do better. And with COVID, they're just trying to adapt. So to be able to take and help build a barrier to withstand that is something that is, it's worth that piece of investment to do that. Being more secure, that goes back to the multiple personal devices that everybody's using every day, being able to jump on things. That's going to get into mobile device management. What are the different ways that you can take and make sure that you're safe? And if something does happen, how can you react? So, You put up so many fences around the house to make sure that you stay safe, but somebody happens to tunnel under one of those fences and get through. How do you react? What are some of those things that can be done? And what are ways that you can activate certain features to keep your information safe? And we'll get into some of those pieces. We've talked about it a little bit already. And then working from home in multiple locations. I was just on vacation last week and was able to get my laptop logged into well, they called it Wi-Fi, but I don't think any of us on this call would actually consider it Wi-Fi. It was not that great, but to go through, check a few things, do some stuff that I wanted to take care of, make sure was taken care of or being taken care of. And just to go through, I had to log in, authenticate, do all those things the same exact way that I do when I'm in the home office. But I did notice that as I was going through and doing things that my company or Micro had gone through and set up a couple other pieces of information it was looking for, because I was logging in from an IP address or from a provider, from a location that I'd never logged in from before. And so it was neat to kind of see some of those things work in the background. I'm an electrical engineer by education, but a sales guy by trade. And so every now and then I get the opportunity to kind of geek out on some of this stuff. And I was like, there we go, it's working. And to see it really come together was it was kind of neat just to see how all those facets come through. Because if you do the same thing every single day, not a whole lot changes. But if you happen to move outside, if you happen to take a trip to Israel and your conditional access is set to not let you, there's got to be a piece of that customer looks at Michael and goes, wow, stuff works. It's really good when you see it work like that. And so these are some of those things that I feel that a lot of folks are asking.
So one of the things I think we hear sometimes is, I want to be secure, but I don't want to make it so hard on, you'll get pushback. So I think one of the things we can talk about with that is, or we can say is, if it's set up properly and it's set up properly at first, things can be secure and it can have a minimal impact on your workflow and your way you're working. But we definitely need to have devices set up. You can't just go into a store today, into Verizon, and walk out in 30 seconds and have your phone set up with email. It's, your phone is, for instance, now more of just as much of a computer as your actual physical laptop or your desktop.
Oh yeah. I mean, and that's the piece of it is, if you just think about it, how many ways can anyone get to their email today? Laptop, tablet, cell phone, heck, even your watch, to a certain aspect.
Sure.
There's just so many ways and so many vulnerabilities. So to be able to take those types of things and cover all of them, you think about it, it did happen slowly over time. But over the last year, Business Premium, some of those SKUs like that through Microsoft M365 has really taken and bolstered up some of those security pieces so that no matter where you go, what device you're using, if it falls within the parameters of how your company wants to do business, you can make that happen.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Here's a slide kind of backs up some of the stuff that I was talking about. So the Department of Homeland Security and World Health Organization have all seen, these are statements from them, quotes from them, where they have basically seen the number of cyber attacks increasing. 50% of small businesses have experienced an attack in the last year. 50% have seen an attack of some sorts. And that average cost is about $150K. I think that numbers actually should be higher. To the tune of about 170. And I'll touch on that one more time about that piece of it. There's another statistic that they don't put down there. And I have a couple of close friends that don't work where I work. I've met them through years of being in the field and are ethical hackers. They go into banks and go, I can breach your network and I can show you how it's done. And because they've got such a reputation in the field now, they actually are recruited daily, for people to come in and go, hey, can you please help make sure we're, secure in these ways? The one thing that we were talking about one time as we were going through, and he was like, most people would pay the ransom to get, the ransomware software, whatever information they have a hold of to get that back. The other piece that they don't think about is most software engineers, great people that have no malintent, always leave a back door to be able to get into the program. If something screws up, they need easy access to get in, figure out what's going on, especially during development. The folks that come in and do, ransomware attacks do the same thing. There's a statistic out there that I believe it is 75% of all ransomware businesses will get attacked again within the next year and a half by the same people that intruded the first time because they built in a backdoor. And you might be asking yourselves, why would you take, and how is Microsoft going to help that once it's already happened? Even if it's already happened, then you go back in and you build those fences, you build those gates, you build those things around it. So once they've been exterminated, if you will, they're off the premises, you take and you build in those safeguards through security. So now they don't have the same access that they once would. Multi-factor authentication has been known to help reduce risks in the 90 percentile range. So if you just set up multi-factor, that can keep out 90% of attackers because they know that it's going to be difficult. Why not move on to somebody else that doesn't have that stuff set up or have that in place? So that's how they go through and kind of pick and choose.
So in other words, we were talking the analogy of the house, and I put that out there on Facebook and LinkedIn. When we're talking about it. In other words, you're saying related to your typical home, right? We put a fence up, we put the lock on, we put the deadbolt, maybe we have some Ring cameras or other type of cameras around the house. When somebody sees your house and they see your neighbor who's just got a single lock, doesn't have all these protections in place, which one are they going to go after? Yeah, if they want your house, they may spend a lot of time and do a lot of stuff, but you've no longer made them the easy target.
Oh, absolutely. Personal illustration. We were on vacation last week. I've got a daughter in her early 20s, and so she is here, and she didn't go with us, so she was in and out of the house, whatnot. Next door neighbor, worked with him at a previous company, didn't even know we're building our houses next to each other, just a happy coincidence. And he shoots me a text while we're on vacation and shoots me a video. Random person drives around the neighborhood. They had the garage door open. Drives around the neighborhood, pulls into his driveway, doesn't even put it in park, backs out, does another loop. 2 minutes later, pulls back in, hops out of his car, walks into the garage, knocks on the door, waits about 10, 15 seconds, grabs my neighbor's like leaf blower and something else, runs out to his car, hops in, backs out, takes off.
Wow.
It was all opportunistic. He cruised around the neighborhood, saw somebody had their garage door open, and my friend was in the house talking on a phone, working from home. Got an alert on his camera, and then he's got a camera outside his house, and he's got one inside the garage, and got the inside garage alert. By the time he got downstairs out of his office and to the door just to see who was there, came out, the guy was already gone. And so, got the police involved, all that stuff. And so arrest warrants out. They know who this individual is. He's got a long rap sheet, and he's just an opportunistic thief. And so, then I think, well, what if my garage door was open? What if my daughter had left the door open and she was at work and we're on vacation? When you take that analogy and you start thinking of, I'll bring up conditional access again. You put those fences up around your data, and only people with the correct passkey can get in. The garage door is always down. If they don't have the right credentials, if they don't meet the parameters that you put around it, the garage door never opens. They don't get access. They can't break through that. So that's the piece that you can take, and you can set these parameters up. You can customize those, and folks like Michael and team know how they can go through, customize those to meet every individual scenario. And we kind of say we tailor it. They can tailor it to you to make sure that you're working more securely, more safely, and that it's not a burden for you to use.
Wonderful. I think
this one builds out a couple, if you want to go ahead and do that.
yes.
And then, well, there we go. And so this is not to say that a lot of the SMBs that are out there, small to medium businesses everywhere across the country, this is not to say in any way that the IT folks that you guys might have currently working for you aren't smart enough. I always look at it and go, wow, I don't see how they do it, because most of the time, if you're looking to replace computers, it's usually best effort, right? You have one person that their laptop fails or their desktop fails. You replace one, you don't replace the entire workforce, that you have working for you. You don't replace all their systems. And that's normal. However, to be able to take and put that burden on the IT folks to be able to take and manage three different levels of computers, maybe even three different levels of OS, three different levels, versions, maybe a better word to use, all these different versions of software on these computers. It's not like you're just saying, hey, guess what? We bought Business Premium. And if you are running Windows 7 Professional, which is end of support, different conversation. So if you're running Windows 7, call Michael. 8.1 Pro, when you buy Business Premium, you get a version, you can upgrade to Windows 10, Professional for free, because you get that upgrade. So then you take and you have everybody running the same software. To optimize that, you could, if you did take and buy new hardware for everybody, everybody's running at the same levels. It's much easier to manage. And so my point is that when you have a lot of SMBs out there that haven't invested in Microsoft and using the security features and trying to make things more simple to use on themselves and their IT group, those guys get stretched pretty thin. And so just like a vulnerability, that if you don't have certain pieces put in place for security, think about the folks that you may have on staff that help Michael and team keep you more secure. If they're stretched thin, if they don't have the resources or those things, that's just as big as a vulnerability than anybody else. So it's not necessarily that they're not smart enough to do it. It's that they're stretched just as thin. So when it says things like that, the bottom line, 62% of SMB lack the skills in-house to deal with security issues. It's not that the folks aren't smart enough to do it. They just might not have the time or the capability to have the tools that they need. So that's when you bring in somebody like Michael and team to be able to take and say, hey guys, let's do it this way, and look for a fresh idea on how to be able to take and secure your information so that you guys can get back to the business of working and helping the company run.
So a lot of times we say we went through, so this is multiple series of webinars. But one of the things we sometimes say is people don't know what they don't know. And we look at like even and when we start talking about security, we say the SMB has to be secure, but the person also has to be secure, right? Especially in the work from home world, you want to secure your data. And then we had an education we were talking about multi-factor authentication. And we said to people, a lot of people don't even know they can secure their Outlook.com, their Hotmail accounts, their Gmail accounts, even their Amazon account now has multi-factor authentication. So when I say people, I think the skill set is absolutely true, but I think sometimes it's also the gap of we don't know what we don't know, right? If we don't know, we didn't know that we could put a camera outside our house and have it connected, we're not going to think about it. So one of the things I think when you look at security is when we talk about this, investing in it, and one of the things that we've had a bit of a challenge is security is a two-way relationship with the customer, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about IT, traditionally IT has been the fact that, oh, we set up everything, we secure it, you put your firewall in place, okay, you're secure. Now, as we look at this world where we've got multiple devices and multiple pieces, the conversation has to flow from management to IT and IT to management, we're finding, and that's where the success is coming in more when it's a two-way conversation about how they're going to work, where they want to work, and how do we keep that all secure.
Yeah, I mean, just if I think back in my career about security, one of the very first ways that hackers used to break into certain things was you had a login attempt. You would come in to log in. they would overwhelm the system with tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of login attempts all at the same time. And it would just overwhelm the system. The system would freak out and it didn't know how to handle it and would basically either let one through or it would shut down altogether. And then when it would reboot, they would be able to slide in without having to put in a password. It was very simple for them to do once they figured it out, but nobody had ever thought about that line of security before. They never thought about, wow, what happens if you do this? Telling a little bit of my age, think about when it turned from 1999 to 2000, how many people paid people to come out to test their software? Because as most people were going through and engineering new pieces of software, they never thought about that first digit changing from a 1 to a 2.
Yep.
You just don't think about those things a lot of times until you do. So same type of scenario is that as you're going through and you're doing these things, that's where working with a professional like Michael and his team is to be able to take and go, we've thought about these things. We've been to certain trainings to understand not only to keep your HIPAA compliance or whatever, type of business that you're in, is to go through and, we have other ways and other access and other experiences that we can bring to light to go, hey, have you ever thought about doing it this way? And here's some benefits to it. How would that affect your team and your work? And that just comes back to tailoring the security around your needs and your wants. Michael mentioned earlier, zero trust. That's where you lock everything down. Every little move you make has got to be authenticated. And you're like, wow, what a hassle that would be. It would be a huge hassle, but you kind of hope that, the Department of Defense or, NAVC or somebody like that in, the military, you hope they have all that information under lock and key that way, that, every step of the way you have to re-authenticate. There is a certain portion of that that is done, and they have very specific software that's written just for them to do some of that stuff. But you can go from that strict to just as simple as, well, all we really want is, MFA, the multi-factor authentication turned on. Everything else, is not really needed because of the style of business that you run. Other pieces and parts, there are certain compliances that you have to meet. So through that piece of it, you have to take and make sure that you're being compliant, but at the same time, not only protecting your data, but you need to be mindful, a good steward of other people's data and protect their information as well.
I think that's a good point that you bring up. We've seen a lot of case in points where clients are interested in a certain amount of security, and then you bring up compliance, but then their clients that they're doing business with to earn their revenue are now coming to them and telling them that in order for them to do business, they have to have the level of security as a vendor now to meet a certain standard. So you may be comfortable with the standard, but your customer or your client that you're dealing with has a different level of standard. And I think we need to always look at this because, the Target one was the HVAC vendor came in. Target had everything else protected, and the HVAC vendor was allowed into the system, and there was no controls about vendor management. This was a number of years ago, and that's how they got in. So I think it's one of those important points when we look at, for instance, our management tools, our other tools, we go to ConnectWise and other vendors, which are the tools that we use, and we get their SOC 2 reports and we find out their controls in place, because we're only as good as the people that we're buying our tool sets from.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And when you dig into those stories and you learn more about how those things happen, the people that wanted to get through Target looked for the path of least resistance. And it just happened to be that poor AC company. They did not have the access, or they had access to that system, but they didn't have safeguards put in place. It was easier to hack their system than to hack Target's. So they hacked through them and used their access to get to Target. And there are other cases like that have happened. I did have a partner that brought in a brand new client. They had another IT provider that wasn't doing a good job. They brought them over, and they had literally just brought this new customer over in about 2 weeks. brought them in, and they were finishing up a big job, and then they were going to take and dump some resources on this new partner that they had just acquired. And as they were going through and finishing up this other job, the person from that end user group that sent out invoices, she was a VP, she sent out all the invoices, went home for the weekend, and came back on Monday. When she came in on Monday morning, started to go through and go, okay, I need to look at some invoices, pull up their email. And there she had a bunch of bounce backs where people had turned on their out of office. Hey, I'm out of the office for the weekend. Hope you have a great one yourselves. Talk to you on Monday. She never sent them an email, which was the first red flag that came up. I was like, what happened? Somebody before this partner had brought them on as a new client. They had got a phishing email, and they sat back and watched to figure out who sent out what emails. And how they did that was they turned on auto forward of emails. And so that auto forward email, they just had everything sent to their, I'm going to say Gmail account. I don't know if it was a Gmail, but let's just say it was. Figured out it was this VP to send out the invoices. Basically looked at the invoice that's sent out. They changed the routing number on it, and then they started billing customers while she was on, on the weekend. She wasn't working. And luckily, she noticed it really early on Monday morning. And I think it was even before hours, came in, figured out, kind of had a thought of what was going on, called the new partner basically pulled people off that new job or the job they were finishing up, and just, all collided at once onto them, locked it all down. And they were able to keep it from anybody actually making a payment. Luckily, the person did it over a weekend, and nobody had paid those invoices. But if they would have started paying the invoices, they would have probably been around, I think they said, about $20,000 per invoice that was sent out. And that was about the range at which they would have billed. So it wasn't too much, that would have caught the end user's attention. And so they were basically able to stop that. But I've had 3 cases this year, almost that same exact scenario has happened, to where that they were phished. And, more than likely it came from, Michael sending me an email, and I don't look at it just right. And maybe they misspell his last name, or maybe instead of, ITS NYC, maybe it says IST NYC. There's just a little bit of variance, a little bit of difference, and that happens. But with certain features turned on through Microsoft, it would notice some of those things and come up and be like, hey, you've never received an email from this person before. Check the address. I've received that notification
We also,
before.
for instance, we have in our own office, we have a thing that says if the display name and the email address in our organization don't match, it puts a banner up saying this display name does not match the email address in your organization.
Yep. Yeah, and those are the unintentioned, right? You think I just look at it, oh, it's Michael, click. And when it wasn't, they're in. And you may not know any different.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are some of the pieces. And I can tell you it happens, to all of us. My son goes to community college, and he got an email this weekend saying he had an irregular login. And it was a phish. Basically, I looked, and all of a sudden we click on the email, and they're asking for a social security number and everything else. So it happens to all of us. We just need to be mindful of what the pieces are on it.
Yep, absolutely. And as we've been talking about this, right, we're talking about, we've talked about conditional access, MDM, a bunch of other things, talking about layering on the security, everything from, through Office, through Teams, through things like that. The one thing that I want everybody to understand too is Microsoft is taking all the security pieces are built off the framework of Azure. So the same framework covers Teams. It covers, any of the Office utilities that you may use, Outlook, all those different components and pieces. It's all built from the same framework. And so why that is a benefit to you is because if data loss prevention, HIPAA compliance, I can't physically take and send a security or a social security number over email. It will come up, and it will not allow me to send it at all. Same thing as with Teams. If I'm in a Teams message, I can't take and send that information over. And you can take and use, for financial, for whatever. There's a bunch of common types of nomenclature that's used for, social security numbers, credit card numbers, birthdays, things like that, that you don't want people sharing. And so in that piece of it, you can also take and put custom ones in there. So there's templates that make it easier to, okay, cover all these types of bases, but we also have a few of our own. You can add those in there as well. So as you're taking and you're doing those things, whether you're collaborating in real time or whatnot, it will take, and you can block those pieces out just to keep that personal identifiable information, or they call it PI, keep, the PI information out there, keep it secure so that you're not accidentally sharing it. It says defend against cyber threats and data loss. Kind of went over that piece of it. Again, most of the stuff, when people are sharing that information, they're not doing it with malintent. They are doing it just because someone asked and said, oh, by the way, can you send me this piece of information? And it could be a legitimate request, but then it will pop up and say, hey, you're not allowed to send this type of information. You can also have that trigger an email to the IT group, to somebody like that can come up and be like, hey, by the way, realize you were talking to your partner and your cube mate over here, and they were asking you for it, and you were just going to send it over to them. It's a trainable moment so that you can take that piece and go, hey guys, we just want to make sure that everybody remembers, this is something we shouldn't be doing. These types of things, we should be keeping a very tight, grip on this information, while at the same time being able to access that data that you need readily available. But only the people that have that access would be granted access to see that information.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you, Eddie. I think we're getting a little short for time. I'm having okay.
Yeah, this just builds out into some of the other features that how they would accomplish those things. Advanced threat protection. We talked about information protection, and I believe in the next slide, I believe, was when it gets into mobile device management. Oh no, it's the end. Well, we'll take 2 seconds and talk about mobile device management really quick. 2 different types of mobile device management. MDM is where you manage the whole device. Then you have MAM, M-A-M, which is the application. So me and my company, it's my cell phone. I own it. I pay the bill for it, all that good stuff. However, I'm running, our Outlook, Teams, all kind of stuff across that device. So my company has access to my device, but only to those applications. So they can go in. If I say, hey guys, I lost my cell phone at the airport, they can take and lock it down, remove access. They can go as far as to wipe the device if I would let them to do that. If it's a company owned device, like my laptop, they don't need my permission to do it. They just do it. Same scenario. So you can either remove a password, make it to where it's impossible to log into certain software, or they can actually go through and blow the device away. If it logs in somehow, some way, or if it's got access to the internet and they see that it, comes online, they can either blow it away or again, make it impossible to log into some of that information so that our customers' information is protected. And then some of our proprietary information is not accessed as well.
And if somebody leaves, they can also, as we've talked about with our customers, is they can also pull the applications off the phone without wiping the phone. So if you were to leave, they can pull their side of the phone off without touching your personal data, which there's a lot of issue in certain states where you can't go wipe an employee's phone without their permission. So the only way you can do it is to pull the corporate data off the phone while leaving the person's personal data available to them. So speaking of work from home, hang on. Sorry, I got somebody at the door. I'll be right. Ellen? Excuse me. Webinar's still going. Somebody's at the door. Oh, sorry. FedEx.
Yeah, I'm expecting a grocery delivery any second now. So
I get it.
Mine will be going too.
Any questions anybody have? Put it up in the chat.
And I saw some early stuff where a couple of folks were really looking for some coffee.
I know it's one of our clients. I'm actually going to see if I can get him to deliver. Get him a cup of coffee, Dan. So, so wonderful. Thank you, Eddie, for your time.
Oh, no, not a problem. And it's enjoy talking with everybody about security. Love the conversation, the flow of it. So, if you guys need anything, definitely reach out to Michael and team. And if needs be, he reaches out to me and we can all have a conversation around how we can help.
Terrific. Have a wonderful day. Thank you again, everyone.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.